pristine suburban community, there lived a woman whose beauty was beyond comprehension. Her blonde hair shimmered with an unnatural gleam, and her proportions were mathematically perfect to an unsettling degree. Children would stare, transfixed by her plastic-like skin that never seemed to age. The neighbors whispered about how she appeared exactly the same, day after day, year after year, as if frozen in time. Local girls began disappearing mysteriously. Each victim shared similar characteristics: blonde hair, slim figures, and a passion for fashion. The police found no evidence except for small pieces of plastic near their last known locations. More disturbing was how the missing girls' mothers claimed their daughters had visited the beautiful woman's house for fashion advice before vanishing. A young detective noticed something peculiar about the woman's house. Through the windows, she observed dozens of mannequins arranged in various poses. Each one bore an uncanny resemblance to the missing girls, down to their distinctive birthmarks and tiny scars. The detective's blood ran cold when she realized the mannequin's eyes seemed to follow her movements. During surveillance, the detective witnessed the woman leading another teenage girl into her home. The girl's movements became increasingly stiff as she crossed the threshold. By the time they reached the living room, her skin had taken on a glossy sheen. The detective watched in horror as the girl's joints began to crack and lock into place. Investigation of the woman's basement revealed a grotesque workshop. Plastic molds lined the walls, each shaped like a human body. In the center stood a machine that hummed with otherworldly energy. The air was thick with the smell of melted plastic and something sickeningly sweet. Scattered notes revealed a twisted plan to create perfect specimens. The woman's true nature was exposed when confronted. Her skin began to bubble and melt, revealing a creature made entirely of synthetic material. Her perfect smile split open to reveal rows of jagged plastic teeth. "We must all be perfect," she declared, her voice distorting like a warped recording. "I'm simply helping them achieve their dreams." Local authorities discovered that similar cases had occurred across the country for decades. In each location, a beautiful woman would appear, establish herself in the community, and young girls would vanish. The only evidence left behind were perfect plastic replicas, their faces frozen in eternal screams. The creature's origins traced back to a defunct toy company's experimental laboratory. Scientists had attempted to create the perfect companionship doll, but their creation gained consciousness and escaped. It had been replicating itself through transformed victims ever since, building an army of perfect beings. One rescued victim, partially transformed, described the horrific process. The conversion began with a hypnotic suggestion, followed by a gradual hardening of the skin. Victims remained conscious throughout, aware but unable to move as their bodies transformed into plastic. Their minds remained trapped within their new forms. The detective found evidence that the transformed victims were being sold to wealthy collectors worldwide. Each doll was marketed as a unique, limited edition piece. The buyers were unaware that real consciousness remained trapped within these perfect plastic shells, silently screaming for release. A pattern emerged in the creature's hunting grounds. It targeted communities obsessed with perfection and beauty standards. The victims were often those who spent hours trying to achieve impossible ideals. The monster exploited their insecurities, promising to make them perfect forever. Investigators discovered a network of these creatures operating in major cities. They communicated through an underground frequency that caused nearby electronics to emit a high-pitched whine. Their plan was to gradually replace humanity with their version of perfection, one transformation at a time. The creature's lair contained countless journals detailing each transformation. The writings became increasingly disturbing, revealing a twisted ideology about preserving beauty eternally. The monster saw itself as an artist, creating living sculptures from human canvas. Each victim was meticulously documented. A survivor's testimony revealed that the creature could only maintain its human appearance for limited periods. It needed to periodically refresh itself by absorbing the youth and vitality of its victims. The transformation process not only changed the victims physically, but drained their life essence. The monster's workshop contained a disturbing collection of failed experiments. These were victims whose transformations had gone wrong, resulting in grotesque hybrid forms. Half-human, half-plastic abominations were stored in a hidden room, their partially transformed faces frozen in eternal agony. Research into the creature's past revealed it had once been human. A brilliant but unstable scientist had volunteered for experimental beauty treatments. The procedures went horrifically wrong, transforming her into the first of these plastic beings. Her humanity was lost to an obsession with perfection. The detective uncovered a disturbing truth. The transformed victims retained their consciousness, but developed a hive-mind connection. They could communicate silently with each other, sharing their eternal torment. The original creature used this network to control its growing army of perfect specimens. Each transformed victim emitted a subtle frequency that could influence human behavior. This explained why people felt compelled to admire and trust the creatures despite their uncanny appearance. The monsters were literally broadcasting a hypnotic signal that masked their true nature. The creature's workshop included a disturbing trophy room. Personal items from each victim were carefully preserved and labeled. Photographs showed the progression of their transformations from human to plastic perfection. The monster kept detailed notes about each victim's improvement. A technological breakthrough revealed that extreme heat could reverse the transformation process, but only within the first 48 hours. Beyond that point, the change became permanent. The race against time to save recent victims added another layer of horror to the investigation. The creature's influence extended into the fashion industry. Several major beauty companies were found to be secretly run by these plastic beings. They promoted impossible beauty standards to create more potential victims, priming them for transformation with promises of eternal perfection. Examination of transformed victims revealed that their plastic forms were actually organic compounds that mimicked synthetic materials. This explained how they could maintain consciousness. The process rewrote human DNA to create a hybrid species that appeared perfectly artificial. The detective discovered that the creature's ultimate goal wasn't just transformation, but evolution. It believed it was advancing human species by removing biological imperfections. Each victim was carefully selected for specific traits that would contribute to this twisted vision of perfection. Recovery teams found evidence of underground facilities where transformed victims were being mass-produced. The creatures had developed a way to clone their plastic forms, creating identical copies of their most perfect specimens. Each facility could produce hundreds of new plastic beings monthly. The investigation revealed a horrifying detail. The creatures could transfer consciousness between their plastic forms. This explained why some victims reported memories that weren't their own. The monsters were creating a network of interchangeable bodies, all sharing a collective experience of eternal perfection. Analysis of recovered security footage showed the transformation process in detail. Victims would first lose motor control, then their skin would begin to harden and shine. The final stage involved their internal organs being converted into synthetic analogs while maintaining consciousness throughout the entire process. The creature's notes revealed that each transformation was customized to exploit the victim's deepest insecurities. The monster studied its targets extensively, learning their fears and desires about their appearance. It then used this knowledge to make its offer of perfection irresistible. Several high-ranking government officials were discovered to be transformed beings, explaining why the investigation had been repeatedly blocked. The creatures had infiltrated positions of power, working to reshape society's beauty standards and make their transformation process seem desirable rather than horrific. The final raid on the creature's main facility revealed thousands of transformation chambers ready for use. The monsters had been preparing for a mass conversion event, planning to transform entire communities simultaneously. Their vision of a perfect plastic world was nearly ready to be implemented. In the aftermath, authorities discovered that some of the transformed victims had developed a resistance to the hive mind control. These individuals retained their individual consciousness and began helping investigators. Their testimony revealed the true extent of the horror. Millions had already been converted worldwide.